In September 2023, the New Mexico State Police released body camera footage from a response that would quickly become a national headline: the death of a 13-year-old girl. At first glance, the footage looked like a tidy, terrible story. Teenagers caught in a lie, and a father whose failure to secure weapons had deadly consequences. But that first impression would not hold. More than a year of investigation, jury trials, new evidence, and a painstaking re-examination of the same recordings revealed a far more complicated and far darker sequence of events. This is not a simple cautionary tale about a stray bullet. It is a story of fear, panic, improvised decisions, and a chain of negligence that culminated in a single, irreversible moment. It started on the afternoon of July 28, 2023, in Cuesta, New Mexico, at the Brown family property. 14 teenagers were there. Kids who had spent the day together, listening to music, joking, and helping with chores like herding sheep into a nearby pasture. Among them were 14-year-old Porfirio Brown, his friend Freddie, Freddie's 13-year-old sister Amber Archuleta, and Amber's girlfriend Christe. They were ordinary adolescents on an ordinary summer day, noisy, careless, comfortable enough with each other to tease, to posture, to show off. Here, faces in the released footage were censored, and several names were later altered in public records to protect privacy. But the human details remain: the music, the laughter, the sudden, ordinary boredom that makes kids do dumb things. At some point in that afternoon, Porfirio retrieved a firearm from his father's collection, a revolver with a spinning cylinder. Witnesses would later say he was showing it off, handling it casually in a way that felt like bravado. Amber told him not to point it at her. According to multiple accounts, she may have stepped forward, attempting to push the gun away. In an instant that would shatter lives, the weapon discharged a single, sharp report. Amber collapsed. Blood began to pool. The carefree afternoon instantly descended into chaos. Phones were grabbed. Voices snapped into urgency. Someone dialed 911. The audio captured confusion and terror. 911, what's the location of your emergency? My girlfriend got shot, a young voice shouted. Where was she shot? In her nose, another voice. Freddie's took over the line and, in the same breath as panic, spun a new reality. It was a drive-by. A black SUV drove by and shot her. A drive-by story was a turn, almost reflexive. Blame the outside world? Make the death someone else's fault? Invent a narrative that removes responsibility from a handheld weapon inside a kitchen. It was a lie born of fear. Police and EMS arrived quickly. They found Amber lying near the back porch of the Brown property. Medics worked to stabilize her. Officers begged the boy who clung to the scene to step back, to let professionals do their work. Please, let us do our job, one officer can be heard saying on the footage. Freddie hovered, distraught. The images and audio are brutal for their ordinary humanity. A brother refusing to leave. Officers attempting calm. Medics trying to save life that ebbed away when Amber's father, Joshua Archuleta, finally reached the house. Paramedics had pronounced her dead. The moment of arrival, his voice cracking, his plea to see his daughter, was raw and irrecoverable. At first, investigators were told a coherent story. 3 teenagers, Freddie, Christe, and Porfirio, repeated the same claim. Amber had been struck by a bullet fired from a passing vehicle. Porfirio even pointed to a specific place down the road, near a red house and a dumpster, where they said she had been shot. Freddie and Christy described carrying Amber back toward the property and then calling for help. Porfirio's father, William Brown, who had been at work when he got the call from his son, echoed the account. In those early hours, the version of events was neat. A drive-by, a fleeing vehicle, a target struck by some passing malice. Footage, released later, fed this narrative. Commentators and newsrooms ran with images of teenagers in shock and a house cordoned by blue tape. but the physical evidence did not cooperate. Officers searched the stretch of road the teenagers indicated. There were no shell casings. There were no tire marks, no blood trail, no bullet damage, nothing to suggest a vehicle had stopped or slowed to fire a shot into the property. The supposed crime scene did not exist. Investigators found no corroboration for the story being told at the house. The contradiction between the teenagers' statements and the reality in the road would prove to be the first crack in an increasingly brittle facade. The cracks widened hours later. Freddie and Christy, under pressure and beneath the weight of what they had seen, returned to investigators and gave a different account. The shooting, they admitted, had not taken place on the road. It had happened inside the Brown home. In their revised statements, they explained that Porfirio had pulled the revolver during a moment that, according to witnesses, was more mischief than malice. He pointed it. Amber told him to stop. She reached for the gun. The weapon discharged. She fell, panicked. The teenagers moved her toward the porch in a desperate attempt to stage a different scene. They dragged her body to the yard, created the story of a passing black SUV, and waited minutes before calling 911. Those minutes matter. In the interviews and footage, the investigators estimated that the 911 call may have been placed 5 to 10 minutes after the gun went off. Those are 5 to 10 minutes in which the teenagers made choices. One of them to call the lie into being, others to assist or to remain silent. In those minutes, evidence was disturbed. According to Freddie, Christy, and later the forensic work, Porfirio began to clean. He allegedly mopped blood from the kitchen floor, trying to remove the traces of what had happened. Items were moved. Clothing was changed. The scene of a death inside a house was converted, in part, into the scene of an alleged crime outside. When state police ultimately re-entered the Brown home, the forensic picture was damning. Firearms were found scattered, some in plain view, some tucked away but plainly accessible. Cartridges and ammunition lay where children could reach them. One rifle matched the description witnesses later gave. Luminol testing, used to detect traces of blood even after cleaning, lit up large areas of flooring that had been scrubbed. Blood was discovered in the kitchen, the laundry room, and in bedrooms. Markers of a life extinguished in intimate domestic space. Witnesses and later statements indicated that Porfirio had mopped the floor in an attempt to conceal the evidence before authorities arrived. Porfirio Brown was arrested and charged with murder. The rationale was stark. A teenager handled a deadly weapon, it discharged. A 13-year-old lay dead. But the investigation did not stop at Porfirio's arrest. The case swept in a second actor, William Brown, the father. Weeks earlier, New Mexico had passed legislation now known as Benny's Law, named for a middle school student who had been killed when a classmate brought a father's unsecured gun to school. Benny's Law broadened parental liability, making it a criminal offense when negligently stored firearms fell into the hands of children and caused harm. At the Brown property, law enforcement seized dozens of firearms. Some were locked, many were not. William, when spoken to by officers, admitted that a few guns were left out, easily accessible. That admission, under the language of Benny's Law, was enough to pursue charges. The father, who had gone to work and then come home to a scene that would break his life into before and after, was now facing criminal liability for failing to secure weapons that his son had accessed. The legal aftermath was as complex as the crime scene itself. Multiple jury trials would wrestle with intent, negligence, and culpability. Was Porfirio a murderer? Had he intended to kill? Or had a youthful act of careless bravado turned into a fatal accident? Was William Brown criminally negligent in a way worthy of incarceration? Or was he another victim of an unforeseeable tragedy? Those questions, argued in courtrooms, replay the same wrenching dilemmas a community asks when violence arrives in a domestic setting. Where does youthful foolishness end and criminal intent begin? When does parental responsibility become criminal culpability? But for the Archuleta family, these legal debates could not restore what was lost. Amber's death was final, and its imprint would be permanent. Her brother, who had been at the scene, would carry the memory of the last minutes with him for the rest of his life. Neighbors who had watched kids play in yards now watched each other with a new wariness. The small town of Cuesta found itself under the harsh light of public attention, the quiet of its streets replaced by intrusive cameras and reporters who wanted a tidy moral to the story. The tragedy of this case is not only the single moment when a gun went off, it is the accumulation of small failures and decisions that made that moment possible. A household where weapons were present and within reach, a teenager's impulse to show off those weapons, a callous or careless threshold where teens thought pointing a gun at a peer could be a joke, the panic that drove them to cover up rather than seek immediate help, and the delay that felled any chance of timely intervention. It is the way fear can morph into fabrication, and how a group's instinct to protect one of their own can turn into a criminal conspiracy to mislead investigators. There is also a legal and social lesson that extends beyond one family. Benny's law was designed to prevent precisely this kind of tragedy by imposing consequences on adults who fail to secure firearms. The arrest of William Brown was a blunt instantiation of that policy. Laws can punish negligence, but they cannot bring a child back. The law addresses one link in the chain, storage and access, but not the entire chain of adolescent behavior, group dynamics, and split-second choices. As the months moved into trials and verdicts, new evidence and re-examinations of the original body camera footage continued to resurface, complicating narratives and forcing the public to revisit the initial assumptions. What once looked like a clean story of a drive-by and parental failure revealed itself instead as something far more human and tragic. An accidental fatality inside a home, followed by a string of choices made in terror that only deepened the damage. The released recordings, once used as a headline, became, under scrutiny, a messy archive of small decisions and big consequences. For anyone who watches or listens to the recordings, the human details remain the most haunting aspects. The tone of a child's voice when she says, "My girlfriend got shot." The pleading of officers trying to keep calm. The father's shattered arrival. The teenagers fumbling attempts to reconcile what they witnessed with what they feared. Those moments are unembellished, and they demand something that law and policy cannot provide: a reckoning with grief, an accountability that includes remorse, healing, and meaningful changes in how firearms are stored and discussed in homes. This case will be studied in communities and courtrooms alike as a warning of how quickly ordinary life can collapse into catastrophe when firearms are present, and when shame and fear trump immediate honesty. It will be cited in debates over parental responsibility and youth access to weapons. But the center of the story is a single, 13-year-old life that ended on a sunny afternoon. An irreversible loss whose reverberations will continue for years. When the body camera footage was first released, just months after Amber Archuleta's death, the facts appeared to be straightforward. To many observers, the tragedy at the Brown property seemed to follow a grim but simple path. A group of teens gathered at a friend's house, a father's carelessly stored gun collection available for anyone to touch, and a 14-year-old boy, Porfirio Brown, selecting a handgun, pointing it directly at Amber, and firing. The official narrative concluded with Porfirio fabricating a story about a drive-by shooting and pressuring the other witnesses, Amber's girlfriend, and even her own brother, to back him up. But if the act had truly been intentional, as investigators initially believed, one question lingered and refused to disappear. Why? What motive could a 14-year-old boy possibly have for killing a girl who was his friend? The two families were close. The teens had spent countless afternoons together. There had been no arguments that day, no simmering tension, no threats exchanged. In the absence of a clear reason, speculation took root. Some whispered that Porfirio had simply been trigger-happy. a child obsessed with guns, desperate to test their power, and Amber had been the unlucky one standing in front of the barrel. Christie, Amber's girlfriend, later testified that what she saw was chilling. As Porfirio pulled the trigger, she recalled, he was smiling. To her, that smile was not an accident, it was something she could not unsee. For Amber's father, Joshua Archuleta, none of it made sense. Porfirio had been welcomed into his home, had shared holidays with his family. He had seemed like a good kid, quiet, respectful, someone you wouldn't hesitate to trust around your children. He seemed nice, Joshua later admitted, but it turns out there were major issues beneath the surface. Joshua also spoke at length about who his daughter had been, painting a portrait of a vibrant teenager whose short life was overflowing with talent and curiosity. Amber was an artist, filling sketchbooks with drawings. She was a musician, devoted to mariachi and guitar. The day before her death, she had spent hours teaching herself a Justin Bieber song, stubbornly practicing until she could play it perfectly. That determination, that joy, was extinguished overnight. For her father, it was inconceivable. One day his daughter was alive, strumming chords and filling the house with music. The next, she was gone forever. The community of Cuesta rallied quickly in grief and solidarity. A GoFundMe organized by Amber's aunt, Glenda, raised money for the devastated family. Vigils were held, candles lit, and voices raised in support of justice and of Benny's Law, the gun safety measure that might have prevented this catastrophe had it been followed. Friends remembered Amber's energy, her love of biking, popping wheelies, taking risks, laughing through life. She touched a lot of people, one relative said, fighting back tears. I just want everyone to remember her that way. But grief was soon joined by courtroom battles. Porfirio Brown, just 14, was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors believed the evidence supported an intentional killing. Before trial began in March 2024, however, a judge reduced the charge to second-degree murder. He would be tried as a youthful offender, but the state was prepared to push for an adult sentence if convicted. Additional charges included tampering with evidence, due to the cleanup inside the house, and even attempted assault on a police officer for his erratic behavior that night. Then came a stunning twist. Porfirio's attorney, Lizzie Bunker, presented a defense theory few expected. She argued that her client had not pulled the trigger at all. According to her, the real shooter was Amber's own brother, Freddie. Bunker claimed that months after the tragedy, her client confided in his mother, telling her that Freddie had fired the fatal shot, and that Porfirio, as a loyal friend, had agreed to take the blame. She even pointed to body camera footage from that night, showing Freddie hugging Porfirio tightly in the yard, while Amber lay dying nearby. To Bunker, that embrace was not grief. It was gratitude. Why, she asked, would a brother hug the boy who had just shot his sister, unless he was thanking him for carrying the burden of guilt? The defense highlighted inconsistencies in witness statements. Freddie and Christie had both said "we" when describing who moved Amber's body from the kitchen to the porch, before later correcting themselves to claim it was only Porfirio. Why the sudden change? Was it to shield themselves? On the 911 call itself, it was Freddie, not Porfirio, who first told dispatchers the story about a drive-by shooting. They drove by. It was a drive-by, he said breathlessly. The defense argued this contradicted the state's claim that Porfirio alone had invented the lie and forced the others to support it. There were also troubling details about the investigation itself. Blood was visible on Freddie's arm and elbow in early body camera footage, yet he was allowed to change clothes and leave the scene without being searched. Christie, too, was released without scrutiny. Neither teen had their phones confiscated. Neither was treated as a suspect. To make matters worse, the firearm that killed Amber was never recovered. Officers had failed to search a nearby dumpster where it might have been discarded. The possibility that one of the teens could have carried the weapon away while freely roaming was acknowledged on the stand by the lead investigator himself. The defense accused law enforcement of tunnel vision, of locking onto Porfirio as the killer from the very beginning and ignoring all other possibilities. They suggested bias had played a role. One of the responding officers was related by marriage to Amber's family, raising the risk of partiality. In court, jurors listened to hours of testimony. They watched the body camera footage, studied photographs of the chaotic scene, and weighed competing narratives. A boy obsessed with guns who killed without reason, or a boy taking the fall for his friend's brother. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury could not agree. 7 jurors initially believed Porfirio guilty, but by the end, only 4 still held that view. And even they thought it was an accident, not an intentional act of murder. A mistrial was declared. While Porfirio awaited retrial, his father William faced his own legal battle under Benny's law. Prosecutors argued that his negligence in leaving more than 20 firearms unsecured had directly led to Amber's death. Photographs showed guns propped against walls, rifles lying across couches, ammunition scattered in plain sight. To the state, it was open and shut. A father who had created a deadly environment for his children and their friends. But William's defense team countered aggressively. They argued the murder weapon had never been found, and it was not certain that it had even come from his home. They suggested it could have belonged to Amber's father, Joshua Archuleta, who, in an earlier police encounter in 2022, admitted to having guns, though he later denied it. If the weapon came from outside the Brown household, then William's negligence was irrelevant. Christie herself, when pressed on the stand, admitted she did not see where the gun had come from, only that it suddenly appeared. Her words, uncertain and shifting, weakened the prosecution's case. It took the jury less than 2 hours to decide. William Brown was acquitted. As for Porfirio, prosecutors, rattled by their mistrials, reconsidered their options. A second trial loomed in August 2024, but the state quietly lost confidence in securing a murder conviction. In the end, a plea deal was struck. Porfirio admitted only to tampering with evidence. He had, after all, been seen mopping blood in the kitchen, and his bloody shoe prints matched those at the scene. For that, he received just 1 year of probation. The outcome crushed Amber's family. They released a statement condemning the justice system, the investigation, and the defense's attempt to blame Freddie. "We are disgusted," they wrote. "We strongly believe this was not an accident. He should be behind bars. We fear for ourselves and for anyone else he may decide to shoot." Amber's life, so full of promise, was gone. Her family was left with only memories of a creative, adventurous girl who loved music, art, and laughter. A community was left divided between those who believed justice had been served and those who believed it had been denied. And 2 families, the Browns and the Archuletas, were bound together forever by a single gunshot, a lie told in panic, and a justice system unable to deliver the closure either side desperately sought. Thank you for watching this case with me. If you want to dive even deeper into the darkest corners of true crime, don't forget to subscribe to Into the Crime Depths. Leave a like if you found this video compelling, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the upcoming stories we'll uncover together. Until next time, stay safe and keep looking deeper.